Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats, weekly podcast episode number 84. I am your host, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan. If you can't do it, well, it's probably not even worth trying, folks. And this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and romance of wooden vessels all over the world. Thanks for joining me today, folks. I'm sitting in my living room with my microphone contraption on my lap. I'm nice and relaxed and ready to talk wooden boats, so I hope you enjoy the podcast today. The featured segment in this episode is an interview with Captain Joshua Berger of the Schooner Adventurous, based in Port Townsend, Washington. Schooner Adventurous is a BB Crowninshield designed schooner that was built in 1913 that is alive and well on Puget Sound, so you're going to want to listen to this interview. Also, I did a couple podcast episodes previously. Episode number 74 and 75 were about the Adventurous, and episode 77 also with Captain Daniel Evans. Those previous episodes, 74 and 75, were with Ken Greff, who is the executive director of the board. I didn't say that right. Chairman of the board. He's in charge of the board that runs the Adventurous Foundation, so you might want to check that out also. Okay, I did make some progress this week in my shop. I got an 8-foot shop light up. I ended up buying one of the 8-footers that has four 4-foot bulbs, which they're T8s, so they're 1 inch in diameter. That's the new trend apparently because they're more energy efficient, and it seems to be doing the job really well. And I plan on sanding my canoe this weekend, the interior, and I'll be starting varnishing next week, so that'll be before the end of April. So I'm looking forward to getting that baby wrapped up. And you probably are too, so I'll quit talking about it. But then I'll be able to move on to my scamp as soon as I can afford to buy the kit and get rolling on that. And that will be a longer project, so stick around for that too. I am making progress on my new ebook that I'm working on. And I think the rough title of that is going to be Get in the Wooden Boat Game, Go Build a Boat. And I've got 4 chapters of that written now, at least a first draft. So I'm making some progress and I'm pretty excited. That will be available this summer sometime for those of you that are interested. So it should be a lot of fun. Also, last Friday I visited Port Townsend and the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building, where I've got a lot of friends now. Had a great time. Met Pam Roberts, the new Student Services Administrator. She was very cordial and accommodated me for doing interviews, and it was really fun because I got to interview some students this time. Got to interview 3 students and get their perspective on what it's like to attend the school and what they're learning and what they plan to do in the future and so on. So it was pretty cool. I got to interview a couple gentlemen that are retired, one that's a veteran, another that was a law enforcement officer, and then got to also interview a young international student from Japan. And I took a video for that also, which I'm going to put up on my YouTube channel here shortly, so I'll keep you posted on that. So lots of fun stuff there. I had a blast as usual. And also got to catch up with Bruce Blatchley, the contemporary instructor who's wrapping up construction of the 62-foot sloop called Sliver, a Bob Perry design. So I got to talk to Bruce, do an interview with him too. So those will be coming up on future episodes of Hooked on Wooden Boats, so stick around for that. Another thing that's kind of exciting is I've really wanted to branch out and start doing some interviews with folks on the East Coast. So far, I've only been able to interview 3 folks there because geographically I'm not there, and I don't plan on going there anytime real soon, but I've got the equipment to do a interview over the phone now and record it. So I'm starting to make some connections back on the East Coast to do some interviews. And I've been talking to Doug Highland, and hopefully we'll be able to hook up for an interview here soon. And I've got some emails out to some other folks. So I'm pretty excited about that. I know there's a lot of really cool stuff going on along the East Coast. And I really want to get dialed into some of that and have that become part of the podcast. So if you're listening, you're from the East Coast, man, shoot me some names if you have some ideas, or if you've talked to some folks that would be willing to be interviewed. That would be awesome. I would appreciate it. We have a new subscriber to the e-newsletter this week, Tommy John. Tommy, thanks for subscribing. If you're not already subscribed to my monthly newsletter, it's high time you get subscribed to it. You can do so by going to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe. Give me your email address, your first and last name, and you'll get my monthly newsletter, electronic newsletter, which is kind of fun. I share about what I'm working on, usually throw in a video or two or some links that are kind of cool, and just talk about what's happening with Hooked on Wooden Boats. And it's a way for me to connect with you personally also. As far as upcoming events here in the Pacific Northwest, the next thing on my calendar is the Wooden Boat Fair in Olympia, Washington, Mother's Day weekend, May 11th and 12th. I'll probably be there on May 11th. If you're listening to this podcast and you can make it, shoot me an email. I'd love to hook up with you, Dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. Next up is the interview with Captain Joshua Berger of the Adventurous. Hope you enjoy this. Take it away, Joshua. Okay, it is March 15th, 2013. I'm sitting with Joshua Berger. Joshua, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Dan.
Joshua is one of the captains of the schooner Adventurous, and we're here in Port Townsend at Boat Haven Marina. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, the Port of Port Townsend Boat Haven.
Yeah, okay. I always get that mixed up with Haven Boat Works,
right,
which is just the opposite.
Right, but, which we're intimately tied with.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So welcome to the podcast today, Joshua. Good to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
And we've been chatting here. They're finishing up some work on Adventurous for the Centennial Phase 4 and so on. But let's talk about you a little bit first. Joshua, where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Long Island.
Okay. New York?
I grew up in New York, Long Island, New York, and grew up sailing in Manhassett Bay there as a kid.
Really? What kind of stuff were you sailing?
Well, it started, my father wanted to learn how to sail. I was about 8 years old, and so we learned how to do it together. And grew up sailing. I got into competitive racing as a kid. I was sailing Bluejays and 420s and lasers and 505s as a kid, and went on to race in high school and college, and so going as fast as I could around small buoys in the water was how I grew up sailing.
Really?
Yeah.
So you learned every body movement possible and every tweak and all that stuff in a small boat that's so critical to win in a race.
Well, yeah, and we all have our foundations for how we get into this kind of work, and so it's a strong foundation of learning the details. And
so did you just kind of learn as you go, or did you had people teaching you along the way?
Well, I grew up racing with a number of mentors and coaches and other sailors, and was pretty closely tied to the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point. We practiced a lot with them in high school, and then I sailed for St. Mary's College in Maryland for about a year and a half of college, and realized then at that point that there was going to be more to life than, like I said, going as fast as you could around a buoy.
Really?
Right.
How'd you come to that realization?
Well, the competitive nature, the competition within the team. Just felt there was something more magical about being on the water and sailing. Sparked, I think, early on from a couple of opportunities I had as a kid sailing on the Clearwater. Pete Seeger's brainchild when it came to Long Island when I was a kid and in grade school.
What was the Clearwater?
The Clearwater is a replica of a Hudson River sloop, and it is really the forebearer of much of the environmental education that you see on tall ships nowadays. It was Pete Seeger's brainchild, and developed this field trip style environmental education program on the water. His goal was to, if people got out on the Hudson River, they'd find a reason for wanting to keep it clean.
Oh, really?
Right.
Interesting.
Right. And it turns out that's much of what Sound Experience was originally based on. It's developed now, but years later, was captain of the Clearwater for a couple of years before coming back here full time.
I see. Yeah.
So it was, sparked by that and other opportunities. I felt that there was more that we can learn from being on the water and being on boats than, like I said, just the competitive nature of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So in those early years, what were your favorite boats to sail at that time?
Well,
your favorite boat?
I raced international 420s quite a bit, and so I had a lot of fun with those. But I really appreciated the keel boats as well.
Was that a two-person boat?
It is. Yeah. And I started doing some offshore stuff and deliveries back and forth between the Northeast and the West Indies and the Newport to Bermuda race, and kind of found a love for being offshore too. Well, just growing up in a sailing community, you get the opportunities, and so you get dragged along as an eager teenager and get invited.
Be a crew member and learn the ropes and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of my first jobs was cleaning sails at a Doyle sail loft on Long Island. So when you graduate from cleaning to making wallets and bags to making corner patches and then getting invited along to go do the Newport Nude Regatta or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a huge sailing community back there, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. So what did you do right after high school then?
Well, I went to St. Mary's College of Maryland. Okay. And I raced primarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did you study at St. Mary's?
Racing sailboats. It's kind of like being in a Division I football team where that's all you do. You practice half the day, Monday through Friday, and you're traveling and racing on the weekend. So it really takes up all that you have.
Wow.
Although, I found a social science professor here and there, and just, my interest was piqued beyond doing that and realized I needed to kind of be elsewhere to do that. Yeah.
So then when did you start the trips, the blue water sailing stuff?
Well, I was doing that as a teenager as well. My father and I sailed between Long Island and the West Indies on his boat.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What kind of boat was that?
He had a S2 36.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
half cockpit
boat?
S2 fiberglass 36-foot boat. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you did that. What was your age then?
Well, my first trip down there, I guess I was 17.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. And how long a trip is that, Joshua?
Typically about 10 days.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 10, 12 days.
Oh, is that downwind most of the way, or?
Depending on the season. Depending on the season.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So your dad had a big boat, and then did you guys have other boats as kids growing up?
Well, I did. I had a Bluejay and had a 420.
Mm-hmm. That's your own boats.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, what was the next transition for you after you did some of that?
Well, I think I took some time off from being in school, and I stayed down in the West Indies.
Oh, you did?
And I did some work on a couple of private charter boats as a maid and a deckhand, and sailed with this couple who was doing mostly single or 2-night overnight programs or evening cruises on a Alden schooner, so a traditional schooner.
Yeah.
And just fell in love with schooners.
Really?
And from that point on, that's really what I wanted to focus on was the traditional rig. Well, there's the name comes from see how she schoons, and they just sail so beautifully across the water. The traditional nature of it, the communication that's needed for sailing a boat like that, and kind of found the traditional niche in my heart, I think is what that did.
Yeah.
And those Alden scooters are so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. So for us novices and people listening that don't know, what exactly is a schooner? How do you know if you see a schooner?
Sure. Well, a schooner is either a 2 or more masted vessel, where the main mast, the largest mast, is furthest aft.
Furthest aft.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you may see a ketch or a yawl with the main mast forward and a mizzen mast aft. The schooner has the main mast aft.
Aft, okay. So how many masts are on Adventurous?
Adventurous is a 2-masted, gaff-rigged topsail schooner.
Okay.
So she carries topsails above her main and foremast as well.
You're not going to quiz me on this afterwards, are you?
Only if you come sailing with us for an ed program.
Lovers, you know. Okay, so you fell in love with schooners, and then what happened?
Well, I fell in love with schooners and also got really interested in experiential and outdoor education, and ended up coming back out to school here in the Pacific Northwest and exploring what alternative education was.
Yeah, where was that at?
I spent some time in Portland at Portland State University, and then finished up my undergraduate degree at the Evergreen State College in Olympia. And there I focused primarily on internship-based and experiential education.
So how did you end up in the Northwest, clear from the East Coast?
You know, I decided when I got back from the West Indies that I wanted to be out west, and got in my car and drove, and found the Pacific Northwest, fell in love.
Really?
Yeah.
Had you been out here before?
Yeah, I hadn't.
Really?
It was my first time.
Yeah. So you went to, you graduated from Evergreen, you said?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was your degree in?
My focus was experiential education.
Oh, really? Okay.
I spent about 2 years developing an alternative high school in Olympia in the public school system.
Oh, really?
And my role was primarily developing internship-based learning. So having kids the opportunity to get out into the community, working with mentors, and then having a formal learning experience alongside of that they could coordinate into credits.
Okay.
Right.
So was part of that boating, or
some of that was boating? You know, my focus was really across the board while I was there. You know, and then I got involved personally with the maritime education that was happening at the Evergreen State College and elsewhere in Puget Sound. Yeah. I bought a small boat from here in Port Townsend, and
oh, you did?
Yeah, a little wooden boat, and was living on it while I was finishing school. And
what kind of boat was that one?
it was a John Thomas Taylor designed and built in 1936 from Vancouver, on the Fraser River. Actually, it was built in the 30s. A little 28-foot ketch.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Carvel planked ketch?
Yep. Port Orford Cedar on Oak. It was a beautiful little boat. Just me and my dog living on it.
Really?
Yeah.
So was that your first wooden boat that you owned?
It was. Yeah.
So did you like wood at that point?
I did.
Yeah.
Again, you know, I kind of fall in love with traditional boats. You know, back on that Alden Schooner, got involved a little bit with the Rose that was back on Long Island as a teenager, and you know, found that I had an affinity for those things that are traditional.
Yeah. So you were living on your boat there in South Sound.
Yep.
Yeah. So Captain Daniel was living on a boat down there too.
You know, it's funny how how parallel our lives were, and didn't really meet. We crossed paths a couple times.
Oh, you
and
did?
Didn't really meet until he came to Sound Experience.
Yeah, because I remember I'm sitting here thinking, okay, somebody else lived on their boat down there.
Exactly.
Did he go to Evergreen also?
He did.
Yeah,
he
that's
did.
what I thought.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So what did you do after Evergreen then?
After Evergreen, I sailed. When I graduated, I took my little boat and did a trip up north and sailed up into northern British Columbia. And I went up to the Queen Charlotte Islands and sailed back down the west side of Vancouver Island and took some time. And went to work on tugboats for a while. And,
oh, really?
Yeah, and working on a couple different schooners back east, the Ernestina and the Letty G. Howard, and mostly working in the towboat industry.
Now, did you have your captain's license by then, or?
I got first license in 1999. Yeah. Although I wasn't using that license on towboats, I was sailing as an AB on the tugboats.
Okay. So then, what happened next after that, Joshua?
You know, I was kind of alternating between working on tugboats and working in the sail training industry on a number of different boats, and eventually ended up taking a full-time captain's position on the Clearwater. I kind of back and forth between the East Coast and Olympia, Washington, and working with the Marine Studies and Maritime Education program at Evergreen. and then took the full-time captain's position on the Clearwater and was there for 2 years.
And that's back east, is it?
That's back east on the Hudson River.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So again, environmental education program on a traditional boat, using the traditional ship as a platform for both kind of group dynamics and community development, as well as marine science and environmental education.
Mm-hmm. So does that boat strictly sail on the river there then?
At that point, I think, at that point we were sailing mostly on the river from Albany to Manhattan, Brooklyn, a little bit out Long Island Sound, but mostly on the Hudson River.
What size is that boat?
She is, I think she's 110 overall, if I can remember correctly.
About the same as Adventurous,
sloop.
huh? Pretty
Yeah.
close?
Yeah.
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 Wooden sloop, who was her designer?
Wooden sloop. It was, I'm trying to, it was also built in Maine, and the design, I think it was a designer build, but I can't remember right offhand, but it is a replica of what were the late 1800s cargo and passenger vessels on the Hudson River. At any given time, you'd see, dozens of these sloops all up and down the Hudson River.
Yeah.
He was inspired by an old pilot on the Hudson River. Pete Seeger was.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So is that boat still in operation?
It is.
Back there?
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a great education program. Like I said, it's kind of the early environmental education on tall ship experience, which many of the current education programs you find on tall ships are loosely based off of. It's such a successful program.
Yeah. Right. So did you go from the Clearwater to the Adventurous end?
Well, actually, I was on the Adventurous a little while as relief mate before I went back east to be on the Clearwater full time. And when I left Clearwater, I came back out west and was again working as relief captain here on Adventurous.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And then somewhere in there you got married. Started having kids.
Yeah, married and having kids.
When was that?
My daughter was born in 2000.
Okay.
December 2000.
Okay.
Yeah. Then they're a huge part of my life and grew up sailing with me and.
Really? So the kids will go out with you?
They do.
And your wife likes to sail too?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Just so they go out on adventures with you on some of the stuff?
They do. Yeah. My little one's out with me quite a bit, and older ones come and do longer programs in the summer with me.
Fun.
Yeah.
And you have 3 kids?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
2 girls and a boy?
2 girls and a boy.
Yeah. Very cool. So when did you become full-time captain then with Adventurous?
I became full-time captain Adventurous in it was 2009. After being involved in the organization and the kind of environmental and sustainability education community here in Puget Sound for quite a bit. I was in grad school at Antioch University in Seattle, focusing on sustainability education and planning. And Sound Experience, being a large provider of environmental sustainability education, fits right into the work that I was doing there, and then came here full time.
Okay. Yeah, and then you moved to Port Townsend at some point too.
Yeah, moved to Port Townsend shortly after working full time here, and when I took over doing the winter maintenance and the Centennial Restoration Project, made more sense to be here full time.
Yeah, right. Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about Adventurous and some of the programs you have going there.
Right.
So I know Ken mentioned you got some pretty cool stuff going on.
Right.
Tell me what's happening.
Well, there's a number of different programs that we do on board. Everything from bringing the public on for either dockside tours or what we call our public or member sails. Members and folks from the public come sailing, and we have kind of an informal environmental education opportunity, an opportunity to kind of learn what's happening on board and what kind of work we do. Primarily, the majority of what we do are formal education programs with youth groups and then adult groups as well. So we provide a field trip style program, 3 and 5 hour field trip style program with school groups. We provide a 3 to 5 day overnight formal education program with school and youth groups, scout groups, and as well as open enrollment programs during the summer. And that might be everything from an intergenerational program, so grandparents and their grandkids on board for 6 days, an open enrollment kind of summer camp style program, all with this mission of inspiring and empowering and educating around marine science and making a difference in your marine environment. So every time we go out, our mission is incorporated to those programs that we do.
So give me an example of something you would teach people about helping the marine environment be healthy.
Well, a number of different,
yeah.
There are so many different ways that, we talk about adventurous being a metaphor for a closed system. And so if you come on board the Adventurous and you get out and underway, you become really acutely aware of how the environment affects you and how you affect the environment. And then you look at your resources and the systems that are in place around that, including the people that we have on board. So we could talk about everything from water consumption and fuel consumption, as well as waste. And so you can look at a very finite picture of that and then extrapolate that out to the larger planet. But when we've got school kids on board, third graders on up into high school and beyond, we'll be looking at plankton and issues around ocean acidification, microplastics, or just learning what a watershed is and what the salmon cycle looks like. Mm-hmm. And we do that all from on board and on decks of the ship. Mm-hmm. But we're also talking about what it's like to live aboard. And what do systems need to look like to live on board sustainably, as well as how do we work together? We can't get that 3,000-pound mainsail up into the air unless we work together, and so there's that element of how
we're 3,000
pounds with the spars and all. And so you got 25 third graders on the port side and 25 on the starboard side.
Right?
Single electric winch, and that's only used for the anchor. Everything else is done with block and tackle and by hand. And sea shanties. Yeah. And so there's that notion of how we need to live together in order to work together. Yeah. And that's what really, I think, kind of sets our education program apart from other opportunities to learn about the Puget Sound and marine environment, is that you bring in the human element as well. Yeah. So can you give me some adventurous stories, Joshua? Some things you've experienced that have been pretty cool or amazing or different over the last few years? I mean, there are so many aspects of how the ship is relevant and how the ship impacts people's lives. Yeah. We say that Sound Experience, the Adventurous, kind of operates in three different areas simultaneously, and it's the intersection of an historical perspective. Here's a 100-year-old vessel who has played a role in so many people's lives in so many different ways, from her maiden voyage with a naturalist to working as a bar pilot schooner, patrolling the coast during World War II, or being a Sea Scout and sail training vessel up into her environmental education mission. So there's this historical perspective that the ship brings, and she is a National Historic Landmark. And then there's the education component, the youth and community education component around marine science, which is just absolutely impactful and relevant to what's happening in our environment around us as residents of this region. And then there's the community aspect. There's how people work together, the community that supports the ship, works around the ship, the crew that lives on board, and the amount of support that we get, whether that's from funders or vendors or local experts. There's an incredible community that supports and rallies around this ship. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of live in the intersection of those things at all times. And so our stories of impact, I could tell you about the 5,000 volunteer hours in 4 months during a restoration project, or I could tell you about the young man and having a hard time graduating high school in this special program, was petrified to be on the water, and works his way back to the helm with me and changes his life by overcoming his own fear and the power he can have just handling the ship's wheel. The connections that students make between what they're putting into the environment and how they're affected by it. The families and generations of people who have sailed aboard her and coming back to the boat. And so the stories are abound every single day. Yeah. Has anybody estimated how many people have sailed on this vessel? Has there ever been an estimate put out there? I haven't seen that. I mean,
that would be an interesting number.
Yeah. I mean, we have anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 participants a year in our 200 days of sailing. Yeah. And that doesn't include festivals and docks. I think there was one year we estimated about 10,000 people crossed our decks just in one sailing year. Mm-hmm. And that's Sound Experience has owned and operated her since '89. Mm-hmm.
So the ships pretty much stay between South Sound and like the Gulf Islands, or what's the territory?
Our typical operation area is from Olympia to the San Juan Islands, and also up into Vancouver, Richmond area, and Victoria.
Mm-hmm. So when was the last time she saw blue water sailing?
There, I think it was the early 90s. She went down to Portland.
Oh, really?
It was the last time that she saw blue water, besides being out in the Straits.
Washington, huh?
Yeah.
Well, did she go down for some education or festival?
I think there was an event going down there. I can't remember the particulars right offhand.
Yeah.
He went down there, and Ken Greff was on board for that. Who
was he
talked
really?
with before? Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Ken's been involved a long time.
Yeah, he's a tremendous part of this organization for a long time.
Yeah.
He was part of Youth Adventure prior to Sound Experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So why do you do this, Joshua?
Why do I do this?
Yeah. I know you love doing it.
I do. I mean, for me, there's lots of ways that I think we can impact change. And, I have my own personal passions around being out on the water and being a sailor. I have my own personal passions about the importance of working towards sustainability and resilience and being mindful here as part of this planet. And, for me, there's no greater intersection than being part of this kind of work. And as well as I can't imagine what we're doing here being able to really do it anywhere else. Mm-hmm. The Sound Experience community, the adventurous community even beyond Sound Experience is a tremendous and impactful community that works and celebrates with each other. Because I see people's lives impacted every day on so many different levels. It may be our participants, it may be one of our volunteers, one of our crew members, and myself and my family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it seems like this type of on-the-water experience impacts people in ways that other stuff just doesn't.
Yeah.
It's just unique that way, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. For me, it's about being able to see systems interacting with each other. And if folks can get a greater understanding of how things interplay with each other, I think that allows us to make better choices. Mm-hmm. A sailing vessel, a traditional sailing vessel, a National Historic Landmark with the history that this boat has, you can see those things interworking with each other at all times. And you can feel it literally underneath your feet as the sheets pull, or as the boat moves through the water, or as the crew's singing a shanty, bringing a sail up into the air.
Mm-hmm. So how many volunteers will you have helping out this year?
A number of volunteers. We had 50 some odd volunteers coming for winter work weekends throughout the winter, and then we have our volunteers throughout the sailing season. And some folks are here consistent, and some folks kind of come and go. We have half of our full-time crew are volunteer interns, whether they're here for 4 months or 1 month. So we have a volunteer internship program as well as the professional paid crew on board.
I see. So what do you do for fun when you're not driving adventurous around?
I'm with my family.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What do you guys like to do as a family? Besides sail?
Yeah, besides
Is there anything
sail.
else?
Right, yeah. My kids are really active, and, one's a gymnast, and one's, in preschool and having fun with everything she comes across. And the son plays baseball and, does little mechanical projects. And so, we're involved, mostly, typical parents involved with what typical kids want to do, play music and bounce on things and run around on the beach.
So are you kind of on 2 weeks, off 2 weeks kind of thing?
Yeah, so Daniel and I are now both working full-time. Okay. Where we sail the ship 15 days on, 15 days off. And then we have work that we're doing while we're off the ship as well. And this is the first year we've had 2 full-time captains on through the winter as well.
Oh, really?
The large lift coming through is an active shipyard here today.
Yeah.
A lot of the work that I'm finding myself doing while I'm not sailing is around a lot of big initiatives.
Let's pause for just a second here. Let this go by. Okay, we're back. There's still a little background noise now. Where were we at, Joshua?
Well, we're talking about kind of the different roles I think that we have on board, and a lot of the work that I've been focused on, outside of my role in operations and administration, certainly crew and programmatically, but lot of my background work is in kind of sustainability planning and leadership. And I received a fellowship last year from a program funded by Toyota and administered through the National Audubon Society, which gave me the opportunity to work on a project that Sound Experience has been supporting, where we've been working with various stakeholders in the maritime industry and discussing what a more sustainable industry looks like. It's kind of off the premise that the land-based industry is, maybe 5 to 10 years ahead of the maritime industry in ideas of green building and being that both economically viable as well as having clear standards and models. There's a lot of great stuff happening in the maritime industry in terms of green or sustainable systems, but not yet coordinated. And so I've been doing some work in this last year and meeting with leaders in the maritime industry to talk about what that looks like for the maritime industry, which has been really exciting. And that correlates with the work that we're doing on the Adventurous to really use Adventurous as a platform and a model for sustainable systems. And so we're in the kind of design phase of redesigning systems on board and really trying to push the envelope and edge of what do green or sustainable systems look like.
I see.
As well as looking and getting involved with kind of green workforce development in the maritime industry as well.
Very cool.
So that's what I've been focusing on, quite a bit outside of, as well as project managing our multi-year restoration process and all the operational aspects of running a tall ship with 15 crew members and sailing 200 days a year.
Just wrapping up phase 4?
Just wrapping up phase 4.
And phase 5 is what?
And the last phase of the hull restoration is completing the starboard side below the waterline.
Okay.
In the last 4 years, we've replaced the stem, the horn timber, the transom, the entire port side, and much of the starboard side above the waterline. One more phase to go to complete. Have an entire. We're hoping it's next year. We're right now in the fundraising aspect, and so that we can finish that all up next year.
Cool.
Next winter.
Very cool. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Joshua. Maybe you could give us your contact information.
Yeah. My contact information is, my email is Joshua, Joshua, at soundexp.org. And you can, reach me through there, and looking at our organization's website, which is www.soundexp.org, and all the different programs we do and all the work that we've been doing and celebrating our centennial year with us. It's exciting. Okay. The next 100 years of Adventurous's life, starting now.
That's a cool way to look at it.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thanks for your time today,
Yeah,
Joshua.
thank you, Dan. I appreciate it.
Okay, take care. Thanks, Captain Joshua, for doing that interview. It was fun to hook up and sit on the Adventurous for a little bit. Actually, we did sit on the Adventurous. We walked around the decks, and then we sat on our picnic table overlooking the marina at the Boat Haven Marina. And that was a lot of fun hooking up, so thanks for doing that. If you'd like to connect with me, you can email me, dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. If you have questions or you'd like to make comments about the podcast or you enjoy the podcast, you can do that several ways. You could do it through the email. You can also call my voicemail feedback hotline at 424-261-2360. You can also go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/voicemail, and that'll take you to a page where you can leave a message directly on your computer, an audio message for me. You can send me pictures and stories, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. I'm known as Wooden Boat Dan there. You can check me out there. And lastly, if you enjoy the podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you'd go to the iTunes store and search for Hooked on Wooden Boats podcast there and give me a review in iTunes. Last time I checked, I had 32 5-star reviews. And the more reviews I get that are positive, the more that brings the podcast up in the rankings and brings other people's attention to it. And I'm getting a lot of positive feedback, so I'd love it if you would give me a review so that would encourage others to listen to the podcast also. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. You know, this is all about getting in the wooden boat game one way or the other, whether it's reading a magazine or a book or building a boat or using a boat or just listening to the podcast and having some fun with it. Wooden boats are rock, as you know, and I'm having a blast as usual. Been doing this for a year and a half now and building my 5th boat. Been to a bunch of wooden boat festivals. I'm really connecting with a lot of cool people in the industry, so I'm just having a blast, and I like to share that with the world. So thanks for tuning in today. I hope you have a great week. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Wooden Boat Dan over and out. God bless.